Okay, so first of all, welcome to everybody to this Shiur, which is a Shiur on the Vilna Gaon, as you can see. It's in memory of our dear member, Dr. Dorfman. And the Shiur has been sponsored by Elizabeth and his sons, Eitan and Danny. And I want to just tell you what was maybe a background. Why is it that I chose this topic as the Shiur Le'ilui Nishmato? First of all, I think it all started off in my mind that I once found a siddur of the Gra of the late Dr. Dov, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. He had given it to the shul, and it readily reflected to me that he was, as we know, a proud Litvak, and that he went out of his way to get a siddur of the Gra. And what Elizabeth said, that as a proud Litvak, he used to joke that they had a mixed marriage. They had a mixed marriage because here was Dr. Dov as a proud Litvak, and Elizabeth has got a lot of Yichastik Lubavitch pedigree. In fact, she said that now he warmed up to the idea of Chassidut, and there's a picture in the home of Shrodeviger Rebbe, a great Talmid Chacham of Chabad. So I think that what triggered off the association. And he, you know that the Vilna Gaon passed away on Chol HaMoed Sukkot. He was born in Pesach and passed away on Chol HaMoed Sukkot. And Dr. Dov Zatzal passed away just before Sukkot. So like these sort of associations, coupled with the fact that today, that in other words, this year is the 300th anniversary since the birth of the Gaon. And I'm sure that if not for the havoc and the chaos that there is in the world today, with all the corona and the shutdowns and not flying, if there wasn't all this in the world, so there would have been tons of lectures, tons of events, all sorts of commemoration for this great Gaon. You can see that the Lithuanian government, I mean, okay, some people will raise their eyebrows after what they did in the Holocaust, but the Lithuanian government, they actually took upon themselves that on this 300th year of the anniversary of the Gaon, to make all sorts of events in Lithuania to commemorate the great Gaon's birth. He was born in 1720. And what they did was, first of all, over here you can see there's a picture of a coin that they minted in his honor. It's the first time that some European currency has got like Hebrew writing on it. Here's the Lithuania, here is of the Gra, and over here also there's Hebrew writing. And you can go onto YouTube, for example, and you can see that the embassy of Lithuania, they've got like radio talks about the Vilna Gaon. They've got certain programs, educational programs in Lithuania. And this would have been not only in Lithuania, which would have been much, much more, if not for the fact that unfortunately all these things happened in this year. Now, just before I start the lecture, I just want to say one or two words of tribute to this great man, Dr. Dov, a wonderful doctor who has a doctor in a full sense of the word, the Refuah HaNefesh and the Refuah HaGuf, who treated all the rabbis of the McDonald Shul, as well as so many other patients with nefesh. He was such an intellectual. But I want to tell you also something very personal about Dr. Dorf. He used to attend. He used to have the Gemara Shiur on Sunday night, and I remember that there was some discussion, and I misunderstood exactly what he said, and I thought he was saying something was very controversial, bordering on sort of, I don't know, some sort of heresy, and I got upset. It was my misunderstanding. And you won't believe it. I mean, after like sort of flipping my lid, as they say in the vernacular, the next day or the next couple of days, I get a knock at the door from Dr. Dorf, and he's delivering me like a gift. It was a whole set of the Sichot of Rabbi Nebenzal, who was very fond of, used to learn a lot of Parshat HaShavuot. Each time he used to take different Mefashim. He was very fond of Rabbi Nebenzal's Pshatim. And and behold, I'm the culprit, but to ease things off, to smooth things off, he comes and he gives me the set of Sichot of Rabbi Nebenzal. And that was typical him, this largesse, this greatness, and Oev Shalom. And a person who was always such an analytical mind, so inquiring. So Yehi Zichro Baruch, and it gives me such a great honor to give the shiur on his behalf, in his memory, and Be'ezrat Hashem, he should have a ALIYA Gaon Edem. I hope that I do justice also to speaking about the Vilna Gaon, because the Vilna Gaon is exactly him. He is beyond Kodesh Kodashim, beyond anything that we can really grasp. So, okay, let me tell you what I mean. I don't want to speak about the learning of the Gaon. I mean, first of all, you have to be very learned to do that. And maybe another time we can touch on certain things. But I wanted to, the Gaon was legendary in his in everything that he did, or his connection to Limud Torah. His Limud Torah was totally he kept Vagita Bo Yoyam Balayla. I mean, his children said he used to sleep about 2 hours a night. He knew the Torah, a lot of it, a lot of Shas by the time he was 8 years old. We don't have to go into all these anyanim. That's not the topic of the shiur. And his understanding of his Torah was totally whole. And that is one aspect that I do want to touch on, and that is he was every aspect of Torah was at his fingertips, and he mamash learned day and night. When I say every aspect, the Gaon was a great makubal. I mean, we know the Gaon is a great halachist who revolutionized learning of halacha and minagim and psak halacha and the way to learn. But he was a great makubal, and his students, he's one of his greatest students, the Nefesh HaChaim, the Chaim Evologin, everyone knows of him, said that the Gaon wrote more works on Kabbalah than he did on Mikla and Halakha. So and it was all one. And this what made him so totally and absolutely unique. So much so that the Chazon Ish had once said that the Gro had almost the status of a Rishon. One of the Rishonim, in other words, of the era of Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, the Tosafot, the Rashba, Ramban, etc. So I'll tell you what I wanted to speak about tonight. I wanted to speak about this. I wanted to speak about the activism of the Gaon Vilna. And what do I mean by activism? I want to speak about more about his Mashiach activism, his activism on Mishichiyut, on coming back to Eretz Israel, That's what I want to touch on tonight. There are a lot of aspects to the activism of the Gra. I'll just mention them. They're not going out on to them. First of all, towards the end of his life, he was very active. I mean, we look at the Gaon as being someone who was, in his Galit Amot, he never held a formal position, an official position. He had his little Beit Midrash. He didn't even have a yeshiva. I mean, he sat and learned the whole day, and people who wanted to come and to learn and to speak to him, they came to him. That's who his Talmidim were. I mean, they didn't have a formal yeshiva. It's not that he gave shiurim. He learned, and people who wanted to discuss with him, they came and they spoke to him. So he was very, in that way, isolated. Everybody knows the story. We don't know all the details, but whatever it is, the accuracy of the story is something we don't have to go into it, but already it tells us something about the Gra, that the Gra always used to have someone who would give him musar, and he asked the Dubna Magid to give him musar, and once he said, the Dubna Magid said to him that, you're a great Vilna Gaon, but if you would go out and be with the Jews in the marketplace, I don't know how much of a Gaon you would be. But the Gaon cried, but he took that, he cried, but he didn't change his way because of that. He remained the same, not isolated, but relatively in his Beit HaMidrash and not so involved. The involvement was because of his reputation. So towards the end of his life, I'll just bring one case, the case of the Hirsch ben Abba affair. What happened was that one of the Gvirim of Vilna, the appointed Gvirim of Vilna, his son was about 17 years old, 18 years old, went to visit a church. We don't know exactly what happened, and what he did was that child decided to convert to Christianity. And that was, can you imagine the absolute shock that there was in the community? And the Vilna Gaon, what he did was, this is one of the typical things, some people think that they're Rabbonim, in front of the Gemara, and they're not so involved. But what he did was he got very involved, and he set up like a plot in which someone else would go now and befriend that person. They bribed him. I think he was also someone who converted, and they got the second person to convince Hirsch ben Abba to sort of just go for a walk out of the monastery. And when they went out of the monastery, so they kidnapped him. They brought him to a certain place, and afterwards they sort of, to use the modern language, they de-radicalized him. That's what the BBC loves to use. They de-radicalized the person, and he gave up his conversion and returned to be Jewish. And when the church heard about this, the Gaon was actually arrested. He was arrested in 1788. He was in jail for a month. You don't expect all Rabbonim to be in jail, but yes, that's how the girl was. And then in September of 1789, he was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison. And the prison was sentence was over Sukkot. He didn't want to sleep. That's a story on his own, because he was not in the sukkah. So the halacha is that one shouldn't sleep even like a nap outside of a sukkah. So he mamash forced himself to be awake, and then he davened, etc. And then he was released and went to be then afterwards in the sukkah. We don't know always all the details when exactly the release happened. And of course, then there's the activism of the opposing the Hasidic movement, which is something in and of itself. So that's not like the topic of what I want to speak about. But now I wanted to speak about his activism in ALIYA to Eretz Israel. And I'd like to start off, first of all, but one of his the Talmidim's his Talmidim's testimony, a lot of the things that about the Gra, we know. I mean, he didn't write biography. He's not the top. A lot of the things that we know about the Gra is from his Talmidim, from the Nefesh HaChaim, who wrote an introduction to the work of the Gra, Sefer Tzniuta, which is a Kabbalistic Perush on the one part of the Zohar. So the Nefesh HaChaim wrote an introduction, and there he speaks about the Gaon's understanding and knowledge of Kabbalah and the Ari and etc. etc. And then there's a book Keterosh, which and also Maaseh Rav, which Talmidim wrote down, recording all the minagim that they saw, what the Rav, how the Gra used to act. So in one of those works, one of the students, disciples of the Gra, he says that there were a couple of psukim that the Gra used to repeat every single day. He would repeat these psukim every single day. And the one came from Tehillim, as you can see over here, 76.3. The Gaon would repeat this daily. It says, Vayehi b'shalem sukkah uma onato b'tzion. The pasuk says that that the sukkah of Hashem was in Shalem. Shalem is a shortened part of Yerushalayim. We know it also from it's a Sweek Sedra, right? That after the defeating of the Melachim, so it says that the king of Shalem came out to greet Abraham. Rashi says over there it was Shem, the son of Noach, and he was the king of Yerushalayim. At that time it was called Shalem. Afterwards it was called Yerushalayim. So to get back to the point, Shalem Sukkah, when the Sukkah of Hashem was in Shalem, the Mana dwelling, or Manato Betzion, and his permanent place of residence is in Zion. And in the book now, there's a book called Kolator. The Kolator is a controversial book. I'm not going to go into it now. We'll speak about it maybe towards the end. But in Kolator is a book about, you can see, it's written over here. I just want to move this. You can see Kolator is all about the book of a book on the Gulan Mashiach, which is written by Rabbi Hillel Mishklov, who was a Talmid of the Gra. He has another over here. Kolator Lamakubal Elokit Orei Siron Rabbi Hillel Mishklov MiTalmidei HAGRA. Rav Sternberg claims that it wasn't like that. Many people contradict Rav Sternberg. It doesn't make so much of a difference, but in this book and as in other books, we've got testimony that the Gra emphasized this pasuk of Vayehi b'shalem sukkah monato b'tzion, because he said that Eretz Yisrael and a sukkah are the same. Now, on the one level, everybody knows this. Everyone says this on Sukkot. They're the same level because what they do is we both enter into the mitzvah with our body. A sukkah with our entire body, and Eretz Yisrael with our body, and we live there naturally, unlike a mikvah, which we also go into with our whole body. But the whole novelty of the Vilna Gaon, and he's repeating it every single day, was because, and here he began a revolution, and that is that the Ma'onah, the place of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Zion and Sukkah is the same. They're the same in the sense that they have to be built. Just like a sukkah doesn't come down from heaven, just like a sukkah, you can't just build the schach. What in fact is, what you have to do is you have to first build the walls, and then afterwards you actually have to put on the schach. And even if there is a sukkah which was already built, as we've been learning in the Shiur, Masechet Sukkah, say if there's a sukkah that's already built, you have to, when it comes to Sukkot, you have to sort of move the schach a little bit. You have to do something. You have to build a sukkah, and by the Gaon repeating this every single day, and saying this, and as he explained in his Talmidim record in his other works, he started then towards the end of his life, he started a revolution. He was saying that the time has come now, that what we do is it's not enough for us. We can't wait for Mashiach to come. What we have to do is we have to now take hold, so to speak, of history. We have to act, and we have to now start the process of going back to Eretz Israel. So that was the great chiddush that the Gra said. And what he did was, so let me just speak about, first of all, I just wanted to speak about one or two things before I get into this. And that is that the Gra, believed that the Geula has to come by natural means. And just like the second return to Eretz Israel, unlike the first return of Yeshua, which everything was miracles. I mean, they just walked around Jericho and everything collapsed. But the second return to Eretz Israel, the second Commonwealth, came because Ezra and a few people, there were unfortunately only 42,000, came back to Eretz Israel, and they started off with Yashrut. So what they did was that's how the Geula came, with Koresh saying you can come, and then it was up to us to come back to Eretz Israel. And that's why the Gra, that connects with what the Gra's name, the name of that book, even though it was by his student, or is one of his disciples, the Kol HaTor, because Kol HaTor comes from Shir HaShirim. And Shir HaShirim, it's the call of the turtle dove, that the time has come now to go to Eretz Israel. And it's not a coincidence that this Kol HaTor was used as the title of the book. Because the Gra, in his now messianic activism, which we're going to go into now in more detail, the Gra was contradicting, and he was doing aside with a famous Gemara that everybody knows at the end of Masechet Ketubot, which is the hallmark of Satmar Chassidut, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu subjected the Jewish people to 3 oaths. And what are those three oaths? That they shouldn't rebel against the Goyim too much, and that they shouldn't go up in one forcefully up to Eretz Israel, etc. Those were the Shalosh Shvuot, and the whole movement of Satmar, which I mean is basically like a minority today. I mean, history has decided otherwise, and today everyone, makes no difference who. It makes no difference anymore, more become sort of academic almost. But the Gra said that these Shalosh Shvuot are referring to the building of the Beit HaMikdash. It's clear in many of the Gra's writing, not only in Kol HaTor. And in that way, he paved the way. And he said, we are not hindered and we're not shackled by the 3 oaths, that we're not allowed to go up to Eretz Israel, we're not allowed to go forcefully, we're not allowed to rebel against the Goyim once we're in an exile, because all those oaths apply only to forcing the building of the Beit HaMikdash and not the first stage of going and building up Eretz Israel. So that's like a very, very important point on how the Gra understood that Gemara in Masechet Ketubot. Okay, so let's now go into one or two things. So first of all, I just want to make a point about the general, I call it general activism. In other words, the Gra was known, I mean, it's not only the Gabei Eretz Israel, but the Gra in many areas we know was against like just relying everything on from Hashem, but that the person has to work. And I brought over here, let's say 3 or 4 examples. I'd like to start also from, let's say, because we're learning in Masechet Sukkah, for those of the Shiur who are looking at this, at the video. So in our morning learning, we're learning in the Masachet Sukkah, we're just towards the end, and we learned about a Sugya on the Yetzer Hara. And there the Gemara says that the Yetzer Hara is so powerful that if Hashem wouldn't help the person, he could never overcome the Yetzer Hara. That's how powerful the Yetzer Hara is. And the Gra on this Gemara says that that unless Hashem only helps a person overcome his Yetzer Hara, if he does absolutely everything in his capacity to have fought the Yetzer Hara, and then even though he still can't overcome, then Hashem will help him. But unless a person does maximum to overcome the Yetzer Hara, he won't get that help from heaven. And that was a general. It was not only concerning the Messianic Inyan, but it was in everything of the Gra. If we look at the point number 2 that I've got here, I hope that it's clear on your screens, and not learning from Malachim. You know, all the Mekubalim, and let's take the Beit Yosef. The Beit Yosef, right, the Marana Beit Yosef, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, was a great Mekubal, and he used to have spiritual forces, angels who used to what we call Magidim, and who used to teach him and communicate with him and teach him secrets of the Torah. And he wrote, in fact, a book called Magid Meisharim, in which he records what the angel used to teach him. And the Ramchal had also his Magid, the Ari had his Magid, and the Gra, who, funnily enough, who was the greatest Makubal of his time, he never had any Magid. And all his Talmidim said that the reason was not because he wasn't worthy, is because the Gra believed that a person has to toil in Torah. He has to give his whole essence to the learning of Torah. Therefore, he did have Magidim who wanted to reveal to him. But what the Gra did was he said, I don't want to have Malachim who now are revealing to me the secrets. I want it to come now through my Yegi'ah in Torah. And that's what he emphasized a lot in when he spoke about in Kol HaTor, when he spoke about Mashiach ben Yosef. Because he used to quote, Mashiach ben Yosef was someone, like Yosef himself, is that the Torah says that everything, just want to move this, everything I hope you can see it. Can you see it, everybody? Just raise your hands. It says everything that he would do, God would cause him to be successful. That's a pasuk from Bereshit. And Mashiach ben Yosef is everything that he would do, God, that everything that he would do, Hashem matzliach beyado. And if I could just add on, okay, or maybe I'll leave it if there's time. Rav Hidabas Nishmato Eden Beged, he went into the Inyan of Hatzlacha, that success comes from the word Hatzlacha, that success comes from the word Litzloach in Hebrew. Because there's a midrash in Tanhuma, the word Litzloach means it's to cross the water. So the word of Hatzlacha, success, is to someone who's prepared to dive into the water. Someone who's not only does, he's prepared to go the extra mile. And that's who Mashiach ben Yosef is. So this is, again, the general activism of the Gra. And as it is in other areas, the Yetzer Hara, and not learning from Malachim, and when it comes to Mashiach. Because, you know, when we come to Olam Haba, so they asked us, one of the 6 questions that everybody has asked us, is the Gemara Shabbat, is did we look forward to the redemption? And now what the Gra is adding on, not only are we asked, do we look to the redemption, did we try to do something about it? That was his Kiddush. I can't bring all the hundreds of sources because I also don't know all these Kabbalistic, how to work it out, but how to understand them. But the Gra then he had calculations that in the early 1800s, that's when the time of Mashiach, 1800s, that's when the Mashiach was supposed to come, or that the period, you see, that's the whole inyan. We speak about Yemota Mashiach, the days of Mashiach. So the era of Mashiach and return, according to the Gra, was going to start in the early 1800s, even though he died in 1797. I spoke about the Sukkah from this book. If you can see this book, it's called over here, from Jerusalem, His Word. Because if you can see it, everybody, it's a book by Rabbi Hanoch Teller, who's a Famir. It's all Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, okay, is a real Litvak, came from. You said something very interesting, which echoes the approach of the Gra. So you can look at it over here. It's on page. I think I got the page over here. It's page 201 for people who are interested. And in it, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman said that he's very fond of the settlers in Yehuda v'Shomron. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman said, because he says, he made a quip. He said, we're sitting in a sukkah which is already made. And the halacha is that if you put the schach first, and then afterwards you build, it's called, it's not a good sukkah. It has to be Chag HaSukkot Ta'aseh. You have to make the sukkah, and not that the sukkah is built by itself. So his play on words was that the settlers are sort of start building the sukkah anew. They're not coming to something ready-made. Whereas we, in the other parts of Eretz Yisrael, we got something ready-made. Anyway, look at the story over there. It's the same idea that in a different way that the Gra was speaking about. Okay, so let's go now into some of the details. The Gra, what he did was that he said in his books on Kabbalah and on he's got a part which 156 steps in order for the Geulah to come. And in that work, the Gra said that the period of the Omer is always a period which is we know that's when the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva died. Right? We all know that's a time of potential greatness and therefore always potential tragedy. And the Gra said that there are 2 days which are days which are auspicious. The 20th day of the Omer and the 42nd day of the Omer. And he told his Talmidim that on those days would be special days, and those days are, they should do things, again, because he was proactive in the inyan of bringing about Mashiach ben Yosef, in other words, which is the building of Eretz Yisrael. He told them to do on those specific days things. Well, the 42nd day we know is the day of Yom Yerushalayim, Chav Chet Iyar, right? And the 20th day of the Omer, just before, I think it's Yom Ha'atzmaut, can work it out. But on the 20th day of the Omer, his Talmidim, who afterwards I'll go into, I'm going to go fast now, but the 20th day of the Omer, that is when the Beit Midrash of Eliyahu was found in 1812, right? And by his Talmidim, and also the 20 days of the Omer, that's when the cornerstone of Nachalat Shiv'ah was laid in 1865. 1869, you can see over there. So, what is Nachalat Shiv'ah? Nachalat Shiv'ah, I'll just show you over here. Let's skip to here. Nachalat Shiv'ah is was the first neighborhood outside of the old quarters of Yerushalayim. It was started off by the Talmidei HaGra, the main one being Rav Yosef Rivlin. The president is related to of that mishpacha, and he and 6 others that's what's called Nachalat Shiv'ah, the Nachala, the heritage of the seven. But Rav Yosef Rivlin was the most, it's over here, you can see Rehov Yapo. If I show you this picture, everyone knows this picture of Rehov Yapo. It's all the restaurants over there, right? You know this, it's Rehov Solomon, right? Solomon Center. Over here, there's like a jewelry shop. Over here, you can see, right? Over here, all these restaurants, like pizza shops, super restaurants, etc., etc. Okay. So to get back to the point, so Nachalat Shiv'ah was started off then in 1869. And the Mesirut Nefesh was unbelievable because, for example, Rav Yosef Rivlin, who was the Talmid of the Gra, that he stayed by himself there for a couple of months. Mamash, a person alone. And why? If you look at the history books, you look at Wikipedia, etc., you'll see that Nachalat Shiva is recorded there as being the third of the Yeshuvim outside the old city, and it's not correct because they said Mishkan Sha'ananim, but it's not correct because those two others were not proper Yeshuvim. They were more like socialist, like dirot, which were there not to be lived in, but sort of to provide, to have some sort of factory or like the windmill to provide some sort of income to the poor. But Nachalat Shiv'ah was a neighborhood to be lived in, and that was Mamash the first. And you can see in some of his history books of Yerushalayim, that's how it's referred to as the first neighborhood outside of Yerushalayim. What I'm trying to show is that how the Gra, the influence that he had on his Talmidim, that they set up things in Yerushalayim, and they were the ones who he pushed them. He pushed them. He himself, the Vilna Gaon, wanted to come to Eretz Israel, but stopped short. He took it as an omen of heaven. We don't know why, that to go back, but he pushed his Talmidim to come to Eretz Israel, and here is some of what they did in Yerushalayim. Okay, before I go on, having said this, I quoted over here something that from the famous book, A People That Dwells Alone, Speeches of Rabbi Dr. Yaakov Herzog, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, page 136. And I'm just reading over here what over here was said. So this is Rabbi Herzog. He is now, as I say, he writes like this. I remember my late grandfather, of his memory, telling me of the scene that he witnessed when Herzl was acclaimed by the Jews of Vilna. This was in 1897 on his way back from Petersburg to Paris. Tens of thousands greeted him, led by their rabbis, carrying the Torah scrolls. And what a meeting! Vilna, the sanctuary of Jewish law and halakhic thought and practice. Its rabbis, the heirs of the Gaon of Vilna, acknowledging a Western Jew, a journalist from Vienna, writes, a man suffused with Western European culture. That's the testimony that Rabbi Dr. Herzog has from his grandfather about them accepting or going out with Sifrei Torah, the Rabbonim. And I think it wasn't that they were praising Herzog. In light, what I've said was they were echoing and they were reflecting the tradition of the Gra. The Gra's tradition, and we'll see now, all his greatest students were the ones who came on ALIYA, 511 of them strong. 511 of the Talmidim of the Gra came to Eretz Israel in the 1800s. We'll just go through the dates now. And this is what happened with Herzog. Herzog was they were just echoing this tradition of the Vilna Gaon. They knew, of course, that Herzog wasn't a Shomei Torah, etc. But what they were happy was that the Gra, who so anticipated, who so foresaw, who so spoke about that we're now entering a situation of that we now have to start bringing the Geula. So now they saw that someone else, right, albeit it being a secular person, he's helping now what the Gra already did 100 years before him. Right? That is what this is like really trying to say. Okay, let's go now to, I just want to go back to here. It's interesting that in the works of the Gra, you know, there's a whole system of Kabbalah that, to look at the verses, the Gra spoke about that verse number 5,700, which corresponds to 5,000, we now 5,781. So that's 1940, corresponds 5,700 is 1940. And in Dvarim, that pasuk says, and the Gra already foretold it, Vayichar Af Hashem Ba'aretz Zagi. It comes from Pashat Nitzavim, that Hashem got angry, is going to get angry with that land. To bring out all the curses that are written in the Torah. And in 1940, Am Yisrael came out, wiped out the whole of Europe. And when the Gra would explain this, what he would do is he quoted another pasuk, a pasuk which comes from Obadiah. We'll just go over here. That in Obadiah it says that even though that it's true, it says Tzion tiyeh pleita v'ayta kodesh. I hope you can read it. It comes from Obadiah. He used to say that, but even though this is true, that in Zion there will be an estate, there will be refuge, and that will be holy. And this pasuk was quoted in the time of the Second World War. It was quoted by a couple of people. First of all, before the Second World War, the Chafetz Chaim, who quoted this, said that in Eretz, when he wanted to go on ALIYA, and he told Rabbi Yochanan Wasserman about the impending doom of Europe, that there'll be terrible tragedies. He didn't know all the details, but he quoted this thing from the Gra, that in Eretz Yisrael there would be a pleita, there would be refuge, and that's how the Prophet Chaim passed on this tradition of the Gra. And Rabbi Herzog always used to quote this, and when Rommel was at the gates of El Alamein and coming closer to Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Herzog was in America and he wanted to come, they told him, don't go back to Eretz Yisrael because Chalila, Eretz Yisrael is going to be conquered now by the Germans. And he quoted this pasuk, Rabbi Herzog, that he's got a guarantee that from coming back to Eretz Yisrael, nothing will happen, and so he has. And to top it all, you can see that this is the Rav Kahaneman, who also had this Masoret tradition from the Gra. This is what he said also, this is how he started off Ponovich. If you can see over here, I'm pointing, I hope you can see. I'm pointing over here just above the people. You can see that this is the facade of the Ponovich Yeshiva today. Can you see? It says, Vahaita Tzion, right? Ubahar Tzion, can you see? And the mountain of Tzion, Tiyeh Pleita, there will be a refuge, Vahaya, Vahaita Kodesh, right? Some of it is like sort of rubbed out. And here, you're not getting into politics, but you can see Rav Kahaneman, that's how he looked at it. And here in Ponovich, well, can you see? Lo and behold, here on the top, right, a flag of the state of Israel, of Medinat Israel. We put it up every single Yom HaAtzmaut. Okay, so this is all the cutting of the Gra. We go back on verse 5,708 in Parshat Nitzavim, 1948 in Dvarim 35. It says, "Ve'aviacha Hashem Elokecha ha'aretz asher asher avetecha v'ishta." Kadosh Baruch Hu will bring you back to the land which you, back to the land, and Verishtan you inherited. Okay, let's go now to the ALIYA of the TALMIDEI HAGRA. The TALMIDEI HAGRA came to Eretz Israel, 511 people in those days. There was an ALIYA 31 years before, and by a group of Hasidim, the Talmidim of the Maggid Minezerich, they also made ALIYA. And but the big ALIYA was of the TALMIDEI HAGRA. And the TALMIDEI HAGRA, as I say, 511 people came. They came in 3 phases. One in 1808, one at the beginning of 1809, other one in Tishrei of 1809. And these people were one of the greatest Talmidim, Rav Sadia, also Ben Natan, great Talmidim of the Gra. Today, many people think that it was a secular Zionist and they're historians who try to downplay this ALIYA of the Gra. I was saying to Tippy Wexler of our library, what a coincidence. I was preparing the Shiur, and I just happened to go in the library to look at something, and I picked up a magazine called Skula, which is published every month or so. Now, today, it's called Skula. It's a journal on a little history. I'll just show you now. Sorry. So this is the book. This is the magazine, Skula. It's a sort of a Hebrew National Geographic of History, right? So it comes out. And as I was looking at it, I see an article, just going through it, and the article was written by someone about the eclipsed ALIYA, the ALIYA which was pushed into the background because everyone wanted to say that Herzl, as a secular person, he was the most proactive. The overlooked ALIYA, and it absolutely is. It's overlooked ALIYA. To me, it's like borders on disgrace. I'm not saying that. I'm not knocking Herzl, Khalida. What I'm saying is that Herzl took the people, the Graz Talmidim didn't come here to make a Medina. That was Herzl's contribution. But he already found that people in Eretz Israel, there were already such a lot of people that now he could start speaking about the state. Whereas when they came, there was hardly any people. And they came with the intention to do something, to build up. They didn't come here like some Haredim want to say, that they wanted to come to just make like some sort of like a big kollel. No, they came to Vadai. Their learning was everything. No one's arguing with it. The learning of Torah was paramount for the Talmidei HAGRA, absolutely paramount. But they negotiated. They wanted they wanted to buy agricultural land so that they could work, and they looked at it as now a time to build up Israel according to now the vision of the Gra of the era of Mashiach ben Yosef. So first of all, what was incredible is, like, as I say, 511 people. They weren't fleeing anything. It wasn't like that they were fleeing. If you look at all the secular aliyot, they were fleeing Kishinev massacres and this pogrom and that pogrom, especially the second aliyah, the first aliyah, which was more plum. There was also massacres. Yeah, they weren't fleeing anything. They came now to build Eretz Israel because the Gra told them that now's the time of Mashiach ben Yosef, the time, the era to build up Yosef. That was number one. And it's amazing when they came back they were shlichim, they came back to Lithuania and Europe to collect funds, to urge people to come. So there's a famous letter of the Kollel. The letter of the Kollel, and how did they write this letter? Like asking people to help and to come in Aliyah. they wrote it as if Eretz Israel is speaking. Right? They said that's how they wrote the letter in poetic form. Eretz Israel, they could put Eretz Israel was asking you, where are you? Why don't you come? Why are you neglecting me? Etc. etc. And there, for example, they speak about they need help. They don't just want like a soccer from, they need help just to set up things, because I've got over here, for example, they say the Sfaradim was successful because of language. In Tzfat, the Sfaradim spoke Arabic, so they could have the woman, for example, Rabbi Yisrael of Shklov said they could help in the stores, in shops, because they could communicate with Arab customers. So this is one of the things that they did. I see that I'm running out of time. Thank you so much for that. But I'll just want to. So first of 1808, 89, 18. These were the times when they came. The first person to come, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Shklov, he sort of went already. The community of Tzfat, they went to Tzfat basically. They went by the Tveria, but they didn't want to step on Tveria. There was already like a well-established Hasidic community, and they didn't want it to tread toes. They were like fantastic, these Talmidim. They said, you know what, there's lots of other things to do. They didn't want to compete for funds and things like that. Wow. With all the tension, they said, you know what, we'll go to Tzfat. And in 1816, the first leader, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Shklov, he relocates to Yerushalayim and revives the community of the Ashkenazim. From 1720, the Churba, because the Ashkenazim couldn't pay taxes, so they weren't allowed to be in Yerushalayim anymore, and they were expelled from the 1720s, the Ashkenazi Jews, and he went from 1816 and he revived it. It's just amazing, the stories. I haven't got time now because it's almost an hour. But Rabbi Menachem Mendel Shklov, what he did was he ensured that first of all, in 1836, there was they managed to the Ashkenazim under his leadership managed to get a permit to rebuild, and they started off a Beit Midrash called Menachem Tzion, and this was looked at as such a can you see now when I tell you this, you'll see what I'm talking about. They looked at as this as such an omen of like redemption coming. They're building up the land, that some of the Talmidim, not all, but some of the Talmidim of the Gra, or associated with the Talmidim of the Gra, they stopped in the Chad Dodi, or we say the verse, Hitnari me'afar kumi, big day tipartechami. Hitnari, shake off the dust of your, Hitnari me'afar, shake off the dust, kumi livshi, rise up and wear your glorious clothes. That stanza of the Chadodi, they stopped saying, yeah, the dust is off already. Look, we are now going to Shalim, we're building it up. And the historians, modern historians say today, that some people disagree, but modern historians say today that it was these people, the Talmidei HAGRA, who set up now the Yeshuvim, Nachadat Shiva, and others, and in the Churva, and they built again the Churva till this was destroyed by the Jordanians, like over here, right? I mean, we know this is how the Jordanians did, that's how it is today. But to get back to the point, by the 1860s, there was a majority of Jews in Yerushalayim due to the efforts of these people, the Ashkenazim, and the Talmidei HAGRA, who pushed for the development of Yerushalayim. And in 1865, so then Montefiore was able to, through his political acumen and his connections, to get all sorts of permits to carry on building. But this majority of Ashkenazim, in fact, till from that point onwards, the Jews were majority till this day in Yerushalayim, all because of the Talmidei HAGRA. And what they did was, I haven't got I haven't got it in front of me now, but anyone who wants that can phone me. They from being an absolute minority comparing to Sfaradim, they became the overwhelming majority, and also the majority of Christians and Muslims all put together, and they acted there with that, always helping the Sfaradim to build up Yerushalayim. Okay, I want to speak about, to end off with Rabbi Yisrael of Shklov. He was just the most amazing person, Talmid of the Gaon. And I've got here, you can see the incredible Mesirut Nefesh of Rabbi Yisrael Mishklov. He only knew the Gra towards the end of the Gra's life. He only knew him for got attached to him for 6 months. And he goes, the Gra is like the Gra. Rav Shklov, he came with the first wave to Eretz Israel. Like I said before, over here you've got the things in the 1808, 1809, 1809, Rabbi Yisrael came. But Anab Rav Menachem Mendel, who relocated to Yerushalayim, he stuck it off always in Tzfat. Now just look at this unbelievable, Mesirut Nefesh of this man. It's just something like mind-boggling. So he comes now, he leaves with all his mishpocha to Lithuania, and he comes to Eretz Israel, and he comes to Tzfat in 1809. Now, in 1812, so it's only 3 years later, there's a massive plague in Tzfat, which decimates the whole community. And so many of the people, at least for the duration of the plague, they went to Yerushalayim. So on the way to Yerushalayim, he lost his wife. His wife on the way, Yeshvar'am, she died. In Yerushalayim, he lost his 2 sons, 2 daughters, and a son-in-law. And while he was in Yerushalayim, his mother and father, who was remained in Tzfat, they died in the plague. So he lost in Tzfat his father and his mother, and the only one who was left was his young daughter, whose name was Marat Shendel. Now, if that's not enough, in 1834, as they sort of recovering and went back, there's a rebellion of Arabs that's got to do with like all sorts of inter-Arab fighting between a pasha from Egypt and someone from Turkey, etc. And then they can't fight they can't fight each other, so they take it out on the Jews. So there was a riot there, they attacked people, they murdered them. The printing press, which was there, was also attacked. Miraculously, the printing press, which was also attacked, but the manuscript of that Rabbi Yisrael wrote of Shklov, called, it's the classic, it's an absolute classic, called Pa'at HaShulchan. Pa'at HaShulchan, because of the Shulchan Aruch, and Pa'at HaShulchan means just the word Pa'at means the corners, it's like it's humility. It's also Pa'at because it deals with the laws of the agricultural laws of Eretz Yisrael, which is one of the Bikurim, Pa'at, Trumot, Masrot, etc. And in it he writes about the Gra, etc. And he writes introduction about also his life, the absolute terrible suffering. And he says that with all this carrying on, the ALIYA, the plague, trying to find Panosa, the going back to Lithuania to get funds, the losing of all his family, and all this, he says, I was crying and I made a neder to Hashem that if it would just help me, I'll write and I'll publish this work. Can you imagine, under these conditions, to publish this classic called Pa'at HaShulchan, and that's what he did. And straight afterwards, it didn't stop. 1837, there was an earthquake in Tzfat. 4,000 people were killed. It was devastating. That was basically the end of Tzfat for the meantime, and everyone relocated to Shalayim. And Rabbi So in all this wrote that with all the Yisurim, he says, all the Yisurim to be here in God's palace, to be in Eretz Israel, to be as part of the founding and the development of Eretz Israel, like a master, the Graf told us, that we're living now in the era of Mashiach ben Yosef, that we now have to build Eretz Israel towards the Mashiach. God, it's all worth it. And I'm so happy that I'm able to be. This is all the legacy of the Vilna Gaon's activism, messianic activism, that not to look at the Mashiach as something which is coming from above, but something that we have to help, that we have to do, we have to be involved in. And this is like a great, one of the great things that we all today, all of us today are living and are taking and are benefiting, and are all the ones who, if not for him, who knows how the history would have turned out. So yeah, Zichro Shel, first of all, Dr. Dorfman Baruch, and all the great teaching of a great Vilna Gaon, Zchuto Yagen Aleinu, Nishmato Eizem Begenzem Eromim, and the 300th anniversary, that it should be continue to always be a Melitz Yosher, and that to inspire all of us to not only to look, but to give others wherewithal to do for the sake of Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch. So thank you very, very much. And I'm now, let me unmute everybody. Sorry, Eliyahu, can you just unmute, help me. Sorry, yeah. My helper is going to unmute everybody.
They already unmuted.
Okay.
Told them that they can unmute.
Okay. So, no, yeah, they're all muted. So everyone,
Told them they can unmute.
everyone now can unmute yourselves, and you can all ask questions and whatever. Right, so everyone's unmute yourselves.
Just want to say thank you very much, and Shkoyach.
Okay, thank you.
All the best
Thank you.
to everybody. I've got
Thank
another
you for that.
meeting I need to leave. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. Your time is great. Okay, thanks a lot. Be well, Friday. Okay, all the best.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Rabbi Katz.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And it's a great honor to have learned for Dr. Dorf. Okay, so
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Oh, man.
Pleasure, David. Okay, so I think if there's no question, I'm going to end off over here. Is that okay?
Yes.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
All right, shalom.
Yesher koach.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank
Can
you.
I just
Thank
very
you.
quickly
Okay,
say?
Jeremy. Sorry?
Can I just very quickly say thank you to Elizabeth and the family. Dr. Dov was a dear member of our Kehillah for many, many years. And as I said, at his Levaya, there are many people in the Kehillah and out of the Kehillah who owe a lot to Dr. Dov for what he did over the years. I know somebody personally who, when they heard that he passed away, said to me, wow, this guy actually helped save my life many years ago. On a brighter note, hopefully our Kehillah, the shul, if we're lucky, maybe next week we'll be able to start davening inside again. And hopefully I don't know how many people will be allowed, but we're working, hard to keep the place open. And we look forward to seeing faces back in shul as quickly as possible. I'd like to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Okay, cool. So be well. Okay. I'm ending over here.
Should have a name on it. Just quiet.
Better stay till he tips off.
Okay, sorry. Let's go over here.